I paid you. Tell the audience.
He did give me the money.
I gave you the $650.
And now I'm just wishing that I stuck to the whole Twitter thing.
No, the money, listen, man. The money's good for you.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've noticed sitting down on the kitchen counter downstairs, you've got some what looks like old medical bills.
Yeah. I don't think I've opened that envelope one time. I just always assume it's like they're like checking in.
Checking in? Checking in to seeing how you're doing?
Yeah.
You don't think it's that we gave you medical care and you haven't paid us for it yet?
I did not think that could be the case. I don't really think they did anything, so I just figured they were.
Well, listen, that's how emergency rooms work. Whether they fix you or not, they do charge you for the services. All right, you ready to go?
Let's do it.
Welcome in to episode 20. What's Right with Nick Wright, the podcast and YouTube show. Like, rate, subscribe, review. I'm going to be honest. I'm hearing our subscriptions on the podcast feed and our subscribers on YouTube have slowed a bit. So if you're listening right now, you're probably part of the solution, not part of the problem. Tell a couple people about the podcast. Maybe tweet about the podcast. How about this? Demonze might not have control of my Twitter account, but I always assume somewhat control of his. If you tweet about the What's Right with Nick Wright podcast or YouTube feed, tag Demonze in it, he'll retweet you. How about that? Are you good with that?
Of course.
Thank you. There you go. So
I will retweet you.
There he is. He will retweet you. So we have a lot to do today on today's show. But first, we must get to what we're not doing on today's show, as we always do. What is not on today's show is Western Conference Finals Game 1, because that takes place in a few hours from us actually doing this, even though it took place a few hours after you guys were hearing this. It's confusing, but just trust me. AB wants to retire in Pittsburgh, no chance. And Tom Brady getting roasted, or maybe more accurately, Tom Brady's social media team getting roasted. That is not on today's show. We will get to what is on today's show in just a minute. But if you didn't hear the episode earlier in the week, we have upped the clock by 2 minutes. We have 12 minutes for the first segment. I am 1 for 1 in hitting the clock with the new 12-minute time frame. It's what we should have been doing from the beginning. So you guys can start the clock. You'll see it in the right top left-hand corner of your screen if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening, you're just going to have to trust me. Start the clock. Demonze, what are we starting with?
So,
yeah,
Miami won Game 1 against Boston, just like you said.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm not abandoning shit, but it's obviously there were key players missing. You did say that the Heat would win because, Celtics were gassed or whatever.
Yeah.
But they were missing.
You're missing Marcus Smart and Al Horford.
I feel like if that's not the narrative, they definitely win the game.
Okay.
But, So are we all just sleeping on Jimmy Butler and the Heat, or what's going on here? I'm not sleeping on Jimmy Butler and the Heat.
All right, so a lot of things to discuss here. First of all, I will give you credit. You have been the biggest Robert Williams Time Lord fan there is, and he played yesterday and played well.
Played very well.
And it was looking great for the Celtics.
Yep.
If the Celtics are up 10 at halftime, and if they win that game in Miami, no Marcus Smart, no Al Horford, it's very hard to figure out how the Heat are going to be able to win 4 of the next 6 as the Celtics get healthier. But then the Celtics, and notably your guy Tatum, had the worst quarter they've had all postseason.
Yeah.
And that was inflicted upon them by the Miami Heat defense and Jimmy Butler. But Tatum tied the modern playoff record for most turnovers in a quarter in any playoff game. He had 6 turnovers in the third quarter, and it went from a 10-point Celtics lead to a 10-point Celtics deficit in the span of 6 game minutes. First 6 minutes of the third quarter was a 22-2 Miami run. Now, that was done some by Jimmy, but a lot by the Miami defense as a whole. But to answer the question about are we sleeping on the Heat, I mean, they're the 1 seed. They made the finals 2 years ago. Everyone discounts that finals appearance because what they're really trying to do, because so much of, not just from me, but from so much NBA commentary revolves around the son that is LeBron James. And so people discount what the Heat did in the bubble as a way to discount what LeBron won in the bubble. If you acknowledge the Heat were an awesome team, it gives more validity to LeBron's championship instead of calling it a bubble title or a Mickey Mouse title. But if you look at it, Like, okay, so the Heat went to the finals in 2020. Last year, they ran into peak of his powers Giannis, and they played poorly, and guys were banged up, and they got swept in round one. This year, they're the 1 seed. They have been able to deal with injuries throughout the year, still be the 1 seed. And now we get to Jimmy Butler, which this is something we acknowledge happens all the time or with some regularity in the negative direction. But people need to open up their eyes that this can happen in the positive direction. Here's what we know happens in the negative direction. An all-time great regular season player gets to the postseason and gets worse every year. James Harden's an example. James Harden is regular season-wise, statistically one of the greatest players ever, and in the postseason is 25 to 30% worse. Before your era, Karl Malone was like this. Karl Malone, second leading all-time scorer. Well, did LeBron pass him yet? I'm not certain. But regardless, he was the second leading all-time scorer. Won 2 MVPs, finished second at other times. And Karl Malone come the postseason would be just a little bit worse. We would say, okay, you're great in the regular season and you're just good in the postseason. Jimmy Butler's the inverse of that. He's good in the regular season, 20 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists. And come the playoffs, he's a different level guy. He ups his game by 25 to 30%. Jimmy Butler, the year they went to the finals, had 0 40-point games in the regular season. In the playoffs, he had 2. Jimmy Butler this year had 0 40-point games in the regular season. In the playoffs, he already has 3. So is Jimmy Butler a superstar? In the regular season, no. In the playoffs, are there 10 guys you'd rather have? Sure doesn't seem like it. So in the playoffs, he's a superstar. In the playoffs, it matters the most. We saw this a bit with your guy Rondo near the end of his career, but that wasn't to the same. What was happening with Rondo was bad in the regular season and then would be above average to good in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Butler being good in the regular season and then great in the playoffs is a unique thing. But yeah, I mean, some people are sleeping on the Heat. Some people picked the Heat to win the series. Heat in 7 was the pick. Feel pretty good about it. But you guys will get Smart back. You'll get Horford back. Your guy Tatum needs to play better. It all is not lost. There's going to be a tight nip and tuck series. However, some people are sleeping on the Heat. Not me, because I've gotten basically everything about these NBA playoffs right, except for the Bucks-Celtics series. And Chris Middleton was out, so it doesn't even really count.
And you're sticking with Heat in 7.
Yeah, of course. I'm not going to abandon it after they win game 1. Yeah. Of course not. All right, what's next?
Chris Paul says he's coming back next year. Woj reports that Ayton's due for a max in free agency.
Yeah.
Suns fans are blaming everyone from Monty Williams to Kendall Jenner. Mm-hmm. So did they just have a bad game 7, or do you think they need to blow it up?
This is a fork in the road moment for the Suns. Because Robert Sarver, who deals with a bunch of off-the-court stuff that he inflicted upon himself, is notoriously cheap. He's the owner of the Suns. Right now, Booker's on a max. Chris Paul's making $30 million per. Mikal Bridges is making $20 million. Jay Crowder's making $10 million. Landry Shamit's making $10 million. Landry Shamit's contract's a disaster. And that's before they pay Ayton a dime. So the fork in the road moment is this, because Ayton will get a max from somewhere. The question is, will it be Phoenix? They could have given him the max last year after he helped lead them to the finals. They didn't. Are they going to give him a max this year?
Any idea why that happened?
Well, I think because Sarver's incredibly cheap and because there's questions about Ayton's maturity. And there's questions about, does it make sense to pay a center in this NBA the max unless he's Embiid or Jokic, that caliber of a guy? But somebody will. The other problem for the poor Suns is Ayton went number 1 in Luka's draft. So they could have just had Luka. Right. Instead, they took DeAndre Ayton. But set that aside. Here is, to answer your question. Yes, it was a disastrous all-time gag job of a Game 7 that was not indicative of the quality of their team. But Chris Paul's 37. There's no reason to believe he's going to be better. He's only going to slowly deteriorate. So the Suns have a choice. Run it back one more time with Chris. Maybe sign and trade Ayton or just let Ayton walk and hope Mikal Bridges gets better. Booker bounces back from a rough series. Chris can hold on. Or pivot the other way. Sign Ayton, move on from Chris. So there's a trade out there if they want it. That's an easy one to make. That is actually about the Lakers, that we can discuss in a moment. I don't know if they would want to do it, but it exists. But there are other teams. There's not a lot that would want 37, soon to be 38-year-old Chris Paul making $30 million each of the next 2 years. But they could do that. I don't think they're going to do that. I think they're going to run it all back and move on from Ayton. But the short version is this. I think the Suns' window is slammed shut. I think the next time the Suns make a conference finals, let alone an NBA finals, Chris Paul will be long retired. And if you agree with me on that, then you probably at least consider moving on from CP3, which I think leads us well, oddly enough, into our next topic. But go ahead and tell us about our next topic, which appears to be about the Lakers.
Somehow the Lakers made the show today.
Yeah, it's been a while since we talked about them.
Prospective coaches are saying that Russ is still in their plans.
Mm-hmm.
Coach Magic and Phil Johnson are helping the
Phil
pick.
Jackson.
What did I say? I said Phil Johnson.
You're thinking of Magic Johnson.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Phil and Magic Johnson are responsible for this. But, who do you think Russ will actually, has any chance of coming back to the Lakers?
No, I don't. I think that people are misunderstanding. Of course, the Lakers are telling coaches that Russ might be back because they're not going to hire all these guys. And if you interview a guy for a job, he doesn't get the job, then he can tell anyone and everyone, they're done with Russ. They're trading Russ. If they want to have any chance to have any type of leverage in any potential Russ trade, which they're already kneecapped on, there needs to be the possibility like, hey, we might just run it back and keep him. So I think even though Phil Jackson reportedly has said, keep Russ and trade LeBron, which is just insanity. I'd love if the Lakers did that, by the way. I don't like LeBron playing on the West Coast. It ruins my sleep schedule during the year. The Lakers are a poverty franchise at this point. But I don't think they're going to.
I honestly don't think Russ was responsible for too much of the downfall of the Lakers.
Okay, I don't think you watched enough of the Lakers games. Russ was terrible. With that said, let me get back to the CP3 thing.
Okay.
So Russ only has 1 year left on his deal. If the Lakers call up the Suns and say, you want to pay 37, soon to be 38-year-old Chris Paul? I don't know. We like paying old guys. You want to be able to get off Landry Shamit's $10 million this year and next year? We'll give you Russ, plus a couple of draft picks, future picks that could be good because LeBron will be gone by then, Chris Paul will be gone by then. You can have those picks. For Russ, for Chris Paul and Landry Shamit, plus picks from the Lakers. And then Sarver can decide, and the Suns can decide, will we try to use Russ or will we just buy him out? Will we try to pay him $38 million of those $47 million to pay him to go away? He can go sign somewhere else. And we can, instead of being on the hook for around $90 million for Chris over the next 3 years, we're just going to be on the hook for this $40 to $47 million for Russ this year. And we get off Shamit's money and we get the draft picks. Because if they do want to, the Lakers are going to really have to thread the needle on this Russ trade. They're going to have to take back bad contracts. Is Chris Paul a bad contract at this point? I don't know. It's hard to say he is, given how well he played during the regular season, but it's also hard to trust his body at the end of a regular season, at the end of a postseason. But I don't really want to slander Chris Paul right now because this guy we're about to talk about is taking care of it for the whole world. What's our final topic, Demonze?
It's been a few days since Patrick Beverley went on his disrespectful rant.
Yeah.
Absolutely went in on CP3. Mm-hmm. Players like KD, Dame, and Matt Barnes backed Chris Paul up, saying that he was, out of line. I think, he might have just been trying to be entertaining. Like, why would anybody care about this?
It's a weird thing, but Patrick Beverley is in the exact wrong position to be disrespectful of a great athlete. Here are the people that, rightly or wrongly, the general public has no problem with being disrespectful of a great player. Other great players, right? Shaq and Barkley on Inside the NBA can say whatever they want. Or guys like me who never played. Right. The only, if you never played, if you're Stephen A., if you're me, you can just crush people and be like, that's the job. If you're an all-time great, it's like, oh, you got to listen to him. He's an all-time great. If you were a role player, people are like, how dare you? How dare you take a shot at Chris Paul like that? It's a really weird thing where if Beverley was just way worse at basketball and never made the NBA, nothing he'd be saying would be considered that out of line. but because he's good enough to make the NBA, but not good enough to be a good NBA player, he's getting flamed for it.
I loved Matt Barnes' take on it, by the way.
Matt Barnes was right. That's what he said. He was like, listen, we were role players. We gotta zip it. Exactly right. No, that's how it works. And so it's why I've always wondered, and then I'll wrap up, like, Laszlo asked me this once, my old buddy from Kansas City Radio, if he thinks quarterbacks get, like, who are quarterbacks more bothered by when they get criticized by? Like, if I am criticizing Russell Wilson, is he more bothered by me criticizing him, someone who never played, or if Dan Orlovsky criticized him? When Orlovsky played, but was known for running out of the back of the end zone on a safety and was a bad player, is a great analyst. Like, who does it bother the athlete more? And I think actually it bothers the athlete more.
No, you're not talking.
Right, exactly right. But for some reason, the commentator are like, that's his job. All right, we'll be right back.
Oh, gosh.
Patrick Beverley he's always hated Chris Paul.
Right.
And
like he tried to like make it seem like it wasn't hate by saying, like I love the guy. Like,
but here's the other problem. If Pat Beverley's going to talk about how bad of a defender Chris Paul is, and by the way, Chris Paul for a decade was one of the best defenders in the league.
He's old.
He's 9-time all defense, but now he's gotten worse defensively and he's always been small, which makes it hard, right? But let's say Pat Beverley was Jamal Crawford. If Jamal Crawford was like, gotta tell you, look at Chris Paul out there and we start licking, because Beverley went like this.
Licking his chops, yeah.
The problem is, Beverley has never been able to exploit anyone on offense ever. Like, Beverley at his apex is a very good defender and might knock down a couple threes. The idea that you could have, pick the worst defender in the league, Patrick Beverley, it's not like clear out for me. He's just a trash offensive player.
Oh my God, 100%.
Which is what made it more laughable. Chris Paul's final 5 games, which were the worst 5-game stretch of his career, are Beverley's career averages. Like, stop it. All right, I failed hitting the clock that first segment, but I was close. I was like really close. Yeah, within a minute, I think it's okay. I'll hit it this segment. We got 10 minutes on the clock. It's second segment of the show. It's episode 20 of the What's Right with Nick Wright podcast. You did very well that segment. Yeah, you know how I know you did well? Is your evolution as a broadcaster. You had one little stumble reading a question. You didn't let it bother you. Yeah. You just powered through. You're like, no reason to stop down. We don't need let's just keep it moving. People understand Demonze is here, not necessarily because he enunciates perfectly or necessarily knows that the guy's name is Phil Jackson, not Phil Johnson. He's here because he's the eye candy of the show, and occasionally he shocks you with a good take. All right, Demonze, what are we starting with for the second segment?
Draft lottery happened Tuesday night.
Yep.
Magic getting the number 1 pick.
Yeah, good for them.
Yeah, the lottery is fun, but what can we do to make it better?
Oh, a little Nick makes it right. All right, here's the deal. Because I actually like the lottery. I like how they flatten the odds. I enjoy watching it every year. There's some suspense. I think Malika did an excellent job on the broadcast yesterday. Malika's the young lady who I told you her kind of rise to prominence in NBA media, how cool that is. It's an unbelievable, and she does a great job. Here's the only tweak I would make. It's not a massive tweak. Because teams should be a little embarrassed when they end up in the lottery. 30 teams in the league, 16 make the playoffs. So you got to be a below average team to make the lottery. You should be really embarrassed if you show up in the lottery repeatedly, right?
Yeah.
I don't think owners should be allowed to send emissaries there. So like the Blazers sent Dame, and the Pelicans sent Swin Cash, who's their VP of basketball ops. I think the lottery, and some owners go occasionally. Dan Gilbert famously used to go with the Cavs. I think the owners of all the lottery teams should have to go, and they should have ownership statistics. So it would say for Vivek, who owns the Kings, it should say Vivek Ranadive, pardon me if I get his last name.
Been here last 5 years.
Yeah. Lottery veteran, his 9th consecutive season in the lottery, in his 9th season of ownership.
Expose him.
Absolutely. Expose them. And then like when a team that's well run shows up, it's like, okay, the Blazers, first season in the lottery in 6 years. Like, okay, good for them. Like, you're doing a good job. That way you're not tanking. Well, it seems sometimes would tank, But owners have to know.
Some shame to it.
There has to be some shame to it. When the Thunder, who have just not tried to win basketball games over the last 4 years, that Clay Bennett or whomever the primary owner is shows up, it should say, best odds for number one pick every year the last 4. I want ownership statistics of how often you're in the lottery. I want those screen grabs floating around, and I want there to be some public shaming of teams that are not trying to compete.
I like that.
That's a good one, right?
That's a good
now,
one.
It'll never happen because the owners technically own the league and are in charge of things. But Bill Simmons, you saw about there being a sports czar, someone who's like the attorney general for the country except over sports, who has power over even league commissioners. If there was a sports czar, implement this. I just think it would disincentivize tanking a bit. And every once in a while, a little public shame for billionaires can go a long way. Okay, what's next?
You've picked every game for the 2022 season already.
Yeah, I did. In fact, let me see if I can find it. Go ahead.
It's so early. Odell Beckham doesn't even have a team yet.
Yeah, this is the grid.
Yeah.
I don't have the picks on me, but I fill out this grid. I highlight it. Green is wins, red is losses, and then I compile it. Okay, so there are my standings. Go ahead.
Yeah. So what are you doing here? What are you making right?
What am I? Well, hold on. I don't even understand what you're asking me here. You're asking me why I do this?
Yes. Like how are you going to pick the outcome of these games? When
because I'm a sports genius.
Okay.
I do it now. Listen, there's 272 games. Do I think I'm going to go 272 and 272? No, of course I don't. But it gives me a good template to kind of base my early season predictions. It gives me an idea of, I go through it one by one and I'm like, oh man. As a for instance, I didn't realize how screwed the Patriots were before I did this. Okay. But when you look at the Patriots, our lead producer, Gabe, will like this a lot. You look at the beginning of their schedule, and you're like, at Miami, at Pittsburgh, home for Baltimore, at Green Bay. Okay, so New England's going to be Vegas underdogs in all 4 of their first games. Then you look at the end of their schedule. New England, at Minnesota, underdog, home for Buffalo, underdog, at Arizona, underdog, at the Raiders, underdog, home for Cincinnati, underdog, home for Miami, favorite, at Buffalo, underdog. So the Patriots, the first 4, they're going to be underdogs.
Was this a sheet you were filling out while you were getting pestered by Deandre?
Yes. Yes. And
that might be a little inaccurate, folks.
No, it's not going to be inaccurate. So let me finish the point, then I'll talk about the annoyance of that. At Patriots, first 4, they're going to be underdogs. Final 7, 6 of them, they're going to be underdogs. They're screwed. Just flatly screwed. Now, occasionally, there's a few squirrely results where after I do it, because I just go week 1, week 2, week 3, and then I add up the wins and losses. And occasionally I'm like, oh, wow. As we're going to talk about in a moment, my model, which is just my brain, seems to like the Bears more than anybody else. But here's the other reason I do it. Other broadcasters sometimes pick, here will be the final standings. And then when you add them all up, they've accounted for, there's 272 games. So your finals records need to be 272 wins and 272 losses. By me doing it like this, every time I go through week 1, Arizona against Kansas City, I highlight green, Kansas City, they're going to win.
All right.
Red, Arizona, they're going to lose. That way, at the end of the year, the records, even though obviously I won't get them all right, the records could be exact. Other folks will do it, and if you do the math on it, it's 280 wins and 264 losses for the league. That can't work. So that's why I do it. I do it in part because I'm a little OCD enough that I want the records to be exactly 272 and 272, but also because it gives me a nice loose template of how I think the season's going to go. But there were, as you can probably see on the right side of the screen, a few outlier predictions. I think we're going to get to those right now in 2 wrongs and 1 right. DeMonze, take it away.
Yes, sir. The 49ers will go 14-3 because Trey Lance is quarterback, Jimmy G is quarterback, or with Shanahan, does it not matter? Or does quarterback not matter? Sorry.
No, I don't think Jimmy G is going to be the quarterback, so we can get rid of that one. It's a combination of 1 and 3 of Trey Lance. I think Trey Lance is going to be really good in this Shanahan offense. I think they were smart for not folding to Deebo Samuel's trade demand. And the Niners made the conference championship game last year with, I think, below average quarterback play. 2 years ago, they made the Super Bowl. I like their coaching a ton. I like their roster. Is 14-3 a bit ambitious? Sure. It's just how once I picked every game, I realized I am winning 14 games. But I do think I think the Niners and the Rams are far and away the two best teams in the NFC. Now I think we're getting to my most controversial pick so far. All right, go ahead.
Admit defeat on one of these predictions already. Bears 11-6, Jaguars 8-9, or the Ravens going 14-3.
Okay, I'm definitely not admitting defeat on the Ravens. The Ravens were 8-3 last year and were the 1 seed before Lamar got hurt. That was despite all their running backs being injured in the preseason. And then late in the year, Lamar got hurt and all their entire secondary got injured. I think the Ravens will be excellent. The Jaguars, I don't love what they did in the draft. I don't love their GM. But I do love that they have a new head coach, not Urban Meyer, who the players clearly were not vibing with, to say the least. Right. And I think Trevor Lawrence is going to be a great quarterback. So them winning 8 games, to me, is totally reasonable. The Bears won. Here's the problem with it. I like Justin Fields.
Okay.
However, you know Danny.
Parkins.
Yeah, Danny Parkins. He lives in Chicago, is the #1 sports media guy in Chicago, covers the Bears. He texts me when these picks came out, and he said, "You're drunk, buddy." And I was like, "You're not believing in the Bears?" And he was like, "Dude, 11 wins is impossible." What is odd is the first time I ever did this was my first time at Fox doing it was 6 years ago. And you know what the big outlier prediction that time was? The Bears. I had the Bears with Mitch Trubisky going 12-4. For some reason,
what did they do that season?
Not 12-4. For some reason, my week by week NFL picks have a strong Bears bias. So I guess the one that's probably the least likely is the Bears. But I'm sticking with all of them. All right, what's next?
You picked these 3 teams to miss the playoffs. Which fan base will you be apologizing to at the end of the season?
Okay.
New England, Cincinnati, or Las Vegas?
New England, I think, is drawing dead. And Vegas, I know they made the playoffs this past year, but the division got so much better, except for the Chiefs, and the Chiefs were already so much better than them. I think Vegas is going to finish last. My answer is very simple. Cincinnati's the one that was the hardest because they did upgrade the offensive line. They did make the Super Bowl. And Bengals fans, I would be the one fan base I would apologize to because they were actually pretty gracious after they dispatched of my Chiefs. I like Bengals fans. I don't have much time for Patriot fans because they're also Celtic fans. I'm not a huge fan of that general area. You're fine. But it's because
Celtics are...
The Celtics fans
like
are
Celtic
irritating.
fans?
No, of course not. All right, what's the last question?
LeBron did a Q&A. What was the most interesting revelation?
Yep.
Picking KD and Kyrie as teammates, saying Luka is his favorite player, or saying the 2011 finals is a low point.
Oh, the most interesting thing was the first one you mentioned. We already knew the 2011 finals was a low point, and he has already said Luka is his favorite player in the league because, listen, LeBron's got a bit of an ego, and Luka's his favorite player because Luka plays
a lot like him.
LeBron.
Right.
When he was asked, who would you pick as far as all-time guys? The question was, it's Michael and Scotty against you and somebody. Who's your teammate? And he said, Kobe, that makes sense. KD, that makes sense. Or Kyrie. The LeBron-Kyrie, slowly but surely, because Kyrie did some interviews that said, I kind of regret how it ended there.
Yeah, he said
Yeah, I mean, maybe Kyrie is reading the writing on the wall that the Nets aren't as high on him as he once was. Maybe a little, I was trading Russ earlier to the Suns for Chris Paul. Maybe a KD Russ reunion in Brooklyn. How about that? And a LeBron Kyrie reunion. I've only been pitching that for 6 months. God, I'd love for that to happen.
Man, I don't even want Kyrie to join LeBron because I just don't want.
You don't want Kyrie to have success.
I was about to say I don't want him to win a ring.
You don't want Kyrie to have success. I understand. I understand why you feel that way. But I do want LeBron to win another ring. And Kyrie with LeBron has been a dynamic duo. With that said,
100%.
Kyrie is not a guy I would pick in that 2-on-2 match because he's not 2-on-2. You got to be able to guard. He's not guarding another guy. All right, we'll be right back. All right, welcome back in. Final segment of episode 20, What's Right with Nick Wright podcast and YouTube show. Like, rate, subscribe, review. And as always, a reminder, Sunday, we get into, I believe, the top 25 players of the last 50 years on our continued countdown of the 50 greatest players of the last 50 years, those special What's Right with Nick Wright episodes. But Demonze, C Block is really your time to shine. I know there was something that we were, as a family, all sitting in the office watching the beginning of the Celtics game, and I said this would be a good topic for the end of the show, but I don't remember what we were discussing. I hope you do. What was it?
I remember a couple discussions last night. One, Mom revealed this picture to me that I'm assuming.
This is not what now I do remember. I was thinking of the thing with your little sister and the ice cream shop.
Oh, yeah, but I'll go ahead and talk about this one first.
Okay.
So I'm assuming that it was like the night that the Lakers got eliminated from the play-in. Mom shows me a picture of you sitting in the bed, boxers on and everything, smoking a Black and Mild. No ashtray in sight, just smoking a Black and Mild on the bare bed.
In just my underwear. That picture will never see the light of day, by the way.
Yeah.
So I don't have a lot of recollection of that night. I think it's evidenced by the fact that I was smoking in the house, in my bedroom. I mean, just bleary-eyed. I wish I could
scrolling through Twitter in the photo, like
I'm just wrecked. Just wrecked. I can't believe I must have been so gone that do you realize how in real life how scared I would be of your mom seeing me? I don't like when your mom sees me smoke at all.
Right.
Much less smoke in the house. Much less get down to my boxer shorts. And that picture, that Black and Mild smoke to the tip. Yeah. It is, I'm smoking it to the filter. And she just snapped a photo of me. I don't remember. I would have bet any amount of money that didn't happen. But there's photographic evidence.
Yep.
Okay. All right. That's not what we were
Speaking of exposure.
Yeah. Let me tell this story.
Yeah, you're
because you weren't there. Deanna, my youngest daughter, yesterday, we're at Sugar Hill Creamery, which is a great ice cream shop directly next door to my wife's boutique, Trentage. By the way, if you're in New York City, on Lenox, which is 6th Avenue, between 119th and 120th, stop by Sugar Hill Creamery, unpaid endorsement, get some ice cream, then stop by Trentage, get some great women's clothing.
Where trendy meets vintage.
There you go. Where trendy meets vintage. Great job. Great family plug there. I'm there yesterday with your little sister.
Nope.
And the people that work there know me and they like talk sports with me. And one of them says like, hey, who do you have, Mavs Warriors? And I said, oh, I got the Mavs. I was like, Luka's one of the two best players in the league. And they go, one of the two best. I'm like, yeah, him and Giannis. And Deanna gets indignant and looks at me and says, what about LeBron? I thought LeBron was your favorite. I'm like, he is my favorite player, but he's not the best anymore. Deanna then, there are people eating ice cream and the workers and people in line. Deanna stands up and says, excuse me, everybody. I want you guys to know that if you're my dad's favorite player, as soon as someone's better than you, he'll cheat on you with somebody else. I said, excuse me? She's like, it's true, Daddy. You always said LeBron was the best. And now Luka, who I never heard of, now you're saying he's better than him? She was pissed.
I think this might have something to do with Fortnite. That might have been like a, transparent little bashing right there.
What do you mean something to do with Fortnite?
So, you remember how you were having her direct you in Fortnite, and then when I started coming around and I'd say things, I feel like she was like, you don't take my advice anymore.
Oh yeah, she got mad at me. Maybe she's just been bitter at me because I picked a better Fortnite coach than her.
She's lashing out.
And she's lashing out by trying to expose me in ice cream shops around New York City, saying I'm cheating on my favorite player by acknowledging someone else is better. So there it is. Okay, that's today's show. Hey, thanks for watching. Smash or just lightly tap that subscribe button. It all works the same. To get more from the show, and make sure you click. Why don't you want to mash the bell too, guys? Or just, lightly tap the bell to get notified every time new content drops. Check out full episodes of What's Right wherever you get your podcasts, or just hit the link in the description below.